and welcome to On the Real Side. I'm Bob Mover, and today on our podcast, we have a lovely, distinguished guest with us. And not just lovely because she's female, because I even say males are lovely when they play like that. I'm like all Lester Young about that stuff. Everybody's a lady when they play. And but this happens to be a great drummer, no matter what she is, who I've known since she was a child, um, Ms. Terri Lyne Carrington. Terri, we're honored to have you with us today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. And we have a little special guest later, which will be her dad, who I knew from when I was 17 years old. I used to sit in at Wally's, which was a club in Boston. And her dad was, especially the Sunday sessions, sort of the cat who decided who was the straw boss of the session, decided who was going to play with who and that kind of thing. And so I became friendly with her father, a very fine tenor player named Sonny Carrington. And a few years later, he mentioned that well, I knew he had a daughter, that his daughter was playing music, and he brought her to sit in with me. And we will talk about that when Sonny gets here. And Sonny's still around, still active, and still a great part of Terri's life. And I'll tell him when he's here, but I'll tell you now, as far as fathers go, Sonny Carrington was my hero. You
Oh,
have idols of who you want to play like and who you want to be like and this and that. But as far as I saw him and how he was with Terri, and I said, yep, when I'm a dad, I'm going to be like that. Fortunately, I am a dad, and I have three daughters, and I've had three chances to be like that. And I think I'm pretty good at being a father. I mean, I think it's nice when you can do something, and Sonny was a very good example for that for me. Anyway, we welcome you here to the podcast, and we'll tell you out front that we do appreciate if you're enjoying the show, and we hope you do, um, to give us a like, and if you want to subscribe, that's also wonderful. It doesn't seem like much, but it means a lot to us that you do that. So rather than bug you about it later, I mention it now. If you enjoy, like and subscribe if you wish. Doesn't cost you anything. So now, Terri, you started playing drums. I think your first set of drums is interesting. It's like Barry Harris used to say to somebody, so people, like he said, "Oh, so you were born into the music. You were born into it." And in that sense, besides your dad playing, your grandfather was, I assume that was on your father's side, was a drummer who had played with Fats Waller and um, Chu Berry and people like that. Did you know your grandfather?
no, he passed away 6 months before I was born.
Oh,
Mhm.
uh-huh. But he was a working musician.
Yeah, yeah. He played around town, around the Boston area. I mean, he also had a day job, but uh, he was in the union just like my dad. Um, I think I was the first of the three of us to only, do music. But
Uh-huh. And were you an only child? I don't remember you mentioning brothers and sisters or
no, I have no
uh,
brothers.
you have no siblings, right?
No, only child.
Yeah, because I figured he would have mentioned other children if there were any. And when did you really feel that you had an affinity to music? How did what was it like to begin playing? Tell me about your first experiences with music, please.
Oh, I mean, I think my first time on stage was with Rahsaan Roland Kirk, sitting in kind of jamming. And then I don't really remember all the early memories because I was so young. But the first time I think I traveled to play, and what I cite as one of my first real gigs is with Clark Terry at 10 years old, and I went to the Wichita Jazz Festival with him uh, in 1976, and that was one of the first real gigs.
Well, I was just wondering though, just in your own head and your own mind and your own heart, when you first saw the drums, like what made you feel I want to play these? Was there a particular song, you liked as a kid, something that attracted you? Hey, Sonny.
Hey man, how you doing?
Good. Very happy to have you here today. This
Okay,
is Sonny Carrington, who I've talked about a little bit.
glad to be here, man.
My idol as a father.
Well, well,
Yeah.
You know.
I can help her on that if she wants.
I
Yeah, I would say, like, since you're both here, I'm interested in that. Like, what was the first thing that attracted you? I mean, like the first time I knew there was a chord change, silly enough, was when I realized the bridge of Over the Rainbow had a black note in it. Da dee da dee da dee da dee da dee da dee da. And I said,
Right.
"Oh, that was a chord change. I didn't know what they call it, but this must be harmony." And then I got into, those is my own personal experience and something. And but I'd like to know what are your ideas on that, Sonny?
Yeah, maybe he can chime in.
Okay, you want me to?
Yeah. You can chime in on that because I don't have real clear memories of
Okay.
the first,
Well,
thing.
the whole thing was it was the music. It wasn't the drum.
Right.
It it was the music that ignited the fire under her to want to play an instrument. Period. She loved the music when she heard it as a kid. And so basically, when she started on alto, I started her on alto. And when her baby teeth fell out at 8, then we switched over to my father's drum set, was sitting in the basement of the house. And of course, I played drums back when I in the 1950s, man. And so I had all the basic stuff. I played a lot of bebop, during that time. So I had the fundamentals of enjoyed drummers. Period. I wasn't a drummer any longer. I was trying to be a saxophone player, but she she chose the drums that were sitting in the corner until her. I
Give me
was
1 second, Sonny. Excuse me. Okay, I'm sorry. So your dad's drums.
right.
I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
Sorry.
Yeah, I like to say too that I think when kids have exposure to instruments and to music, they're going to, take an interest. That's all about the exposure. So when people
Yeah,
ask me why the
I would
drums,
say that's it.
often I just say because they were there.
Yeah, they were.
They were, I had access. A lot of people don't have access.
She had exposure to the music itself, and it didn't make any difference to her as a kid what she played at that time. She just wanted to play music because she loved the sound of the music. As I said, playing 3 notes on the alto and could play riffs with me, then I knew that she was interested in the music. That's when the drums came in. I had them in the house.
Mhm.
Right. That's how it happens. I mean, one of my earliest memories is sitting in my mother's arms and listening to Billie Holiday and Frank Sinatra while my mother hit me on the head and went to give the pocket, the 2 and 4 or the hi hat. She
Okay.
she she went. I think I was probably a year old or so, and it's the music. I knew something was good. I like this feeling. It swung. I think that's she probably said. This music makes me happy. I think that's probably what happened.
I actually remember saying that in an interview when I was 10 or 11. That
Right? Did you say that?
yeah, I remember they made it like the quote of the interview. Jazz makes me happy.
Well, that's what we're still saying. I think that's what why we don't change. I think we grow, but I think a part of us has to always feel that. When I pick up my horn, it's like the first time all over again. And it's
Mhm.
still, I still think I'm going to fall on my face every time too. But then when I realize I'm not going to, hey, I know something about this and this feels good. The feeling takes over, and I don't worry about failure anymore. And
There's
here we go, you know. But it's funny. I just always feel it's the first time.
there's another part to this that's got to do with the spirit. When I lost my father, I lost everything musically for me. You know, I lost him after we got through playing a set, and that was, you know,
Wait a minute. Could you speak loud? Now I hear you.
okay. I'm sorry. When I lost my father, that was a bit of a tragedy to me. After we got through playing a set, okay, because he played drums. My dad played drums with Chu Berry and Fats Waller and all those cats in the
Right.
1940s.
I had read that about him and was talking to Terry a little bit about that.
So that that whole transition, or let's just say that spirit of my family, transferred through me from him to me to her. And that's the only thing that we have to put God in this, man, because you can't you can't figure out how this all happened. You know, it's the spirit took over, and that was it. And I believe it till this day because it's just impossible for it all to have happened like that.
So you
Uh,
lost your dad just 6 months before Terry was born, right?
yes, and I just believe that his spirit took over, and that was it.
It
Uh,
just kind of legit went from him to her.
right.
I mean, I remember also when I first started playing, I remember my grandmother saying, "Oh, she looks like Matt at
Yeah.
the drum set."
Yeah. Looks like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of I can relate to those things that that happen. In my family, it was funny. My great grandfather had been a violinist and a composer, and nobody was sure where he came from. They knew he was Jewish, but he could have come from Russia. He could have come from Italy and gone to Russia. He could have come from Holland. They weren't sure, but he was. They said they always told me he died of a broken heart. I
Mm.
said, "What do you mean?" They said, "Well, the world didn't accept his music. He wrote string quartets and symphonies, and he used to just give lessons in Lynn, Massachusetts. He would
Well, that,
just barely made a living, and was very sad because he was kind of a brilliant violinist and composer, and the world just didn't accept it. And somewhere, one of my relatives has some of his scores somewhere, which I've been wanting to find for years. But I saw a picture of the guy, and I don't even know his name. It was really weird, and I can see the resemblance. We look very similar. So it's
a common thing here. That's where I was born and raised, and that's where my dad and all we all grew. I grew up there in Lynn.
in Lynn.
That's where the Melody Lounge. I started at the Melody Lounge at 14, 13,
Yeah,
14.
Lynn, City of Sin.
Oh,
They used to say, but yeah,
yeah.
my grandparents lived on Walcott Road,
Okay.
right near the seashore. The first place I lived was the Breakers.
Okay. Yeah, I know where the breakers were.
When they brought me back from the hospital, we stayed at the Breakers. That was where first place I was.
Right.
Yeah. So wow. So you came from Lynn, and now you grew up. I was thinking there was a generation in Boston, like people like Sabby Lewis, and that those people like Jerry Heffron, and
Yeah. Well, I can name you Dick Whitmore, Charlie Mariano, Nat Pierce. I knew all those guys as a kid. They used to let me sit in there. I played drums with them when I was 14, just learning how to play along with Jimmy Mosier and Paul Fontaine. I could
yeah.
go around,
Well,
you
they
know.
were old. They were about your age, Jimmy Moser and Paul Fontaine, right? Were they older than you?
No, we were the same age. We
You were
came
the
up.
same age, yeah. Now Joe Gordon he was older than you, and Charlie Mariano was older than you,
Yeah, right.
and
I
Roy
knew
Haynes and Alan
Charlie.
Dawson were older than you.
Yeah, I knew Charlie very well. You know, seeing him every day and at the Melody Lounge because that was his gig. him along with Jackie Byard. I mean, I met all those guys. It was around them when I was a kid, when I was 13, 12, 13, 14 years old. They all came, they all there because the Melody Lounge was it. Live sessions with Symphony Sid there on Sundays. Well,
Wow.
Lynn was hopping at that time.
What year was this?
53, 52.
Because I'm trying to think
You
of
know,
also, was that around the time that he married Toshiko?
after Tashika didn't come until 56 or 7.
Yeah,
Okay,
that was later. Yeah, but
Yeah.
later.
Charlie was the Boston bird, they used to call him. You know, the bird of Boston.
Oh, I know. Boston Bernie was a very good friend of
No, he
mine.
said the bird of Boston, Charlie Mariano.
Oh yeah,
Boston
the
bird.
bird of Boston. Yeah, Charlie was. He was a hell of a nice cat, man. That's all I can say. I love Charlie as a person.
He was a beautiful cat. I met him one time only, and it's a funny story. Charlie had spent some time in India.
Mhm.
He was, he actually went into it. He learned to play the nagaswaram, which is sort of like an Indian type saxophone, Indian reed instrument. And so I met him at this party, and he was very influenced by his Indian thing. And it was at a big loft of Mike Knock, the pianist.
Mike, oh, I play with Mike. I used to play Jam Sisters over to the Reef with Mike.
Oh well, he had a pad in New York. For a
Hmm.
while, he was married to this wealthy Brazilian woman, and they
Hmm.
had this big, huge loft. And it was like this party they threw, and it looked like Breakfast at Tiffany's party, like everybody's crowded in, real New York scene. And I got Charlie was there, so I immediately, I was about 23 years old, gravitated toward Charlie and just started talking to him, asking him questions and all that kind of thing. And I was drinking a glass of red wine, and Charlie was wearing this beautiful silk white Indian type outfit, like you see Nehru and Gandhi in the original thing. He'd gotten it in India because he had lived in India, and it was beautiful what he was wearing. And a lady bumped into me in the middle of my conversation with Charlie, and I spilled the red wine all over Charlie Mariano, and
Well,
I was
guy,
mortified.
he was quite a guy, and he was a nice looking cat, and the ladies loved him. You know what I
They
mean?
did, and I was mortified to have spilled wine on Charlie at this party. And he was so cool. He turned to me and he said, "Well, I think you should get another glass of wine." I
Well,
was like, "Charlie, I'll pay for the dry cleaning. Don't worry." And this and that. He was like, "Get yourself another glass of wine." So,
along with him was Nat Pierce. I knew Nat. All those guys, taught me how about the form of playing rhythm changes against the blues, playing drums, so that I would be able to play fours and stuff like that. The basic fundamental bebop. You know,
right, and Nat was a big bassy guy, right? He had transcribed a lot of bassy charts. Uh, my dad was around at that time too, playing trumpet. Jimmy Mover, and he was a lead player, and he played in a band that Nat Pierce had, where they transcribed a lot of, the Basie book, and so that's when I met you. Was at Wally's, and on a Sunday afternoon, I believe I originally met you there. You were playing tenor, and I was 17 years old, and I was playing alto, and you were nice to me, and then a few years later, you brought in Terri,
yeah,
and told me that you had this daughter, and I was playing somewhere in town, I think with James Williams and Bill
yeah.
Pierce, and it was my gig, I think, and I said sure she could sit in, and then she played great, and from then on, I remember one time he asked me to show her some harmony and stuff, and we got together for an hour one afternoon. I showed her some stuff about 251 and stuff,
Mhm.
basic things, because you were thinking about playing vibes. I think I don't know if you ever
Yeah, because she was starting to take lessons with Alan at that time.
Alan
Oh,
Dawes, yeah.
I started taking vibes lessons at
Vibes.
Berklee
Yeah, at Berkeley.
when I was 17. But maybe I studied some before that with Alan on vibes.
Yeah, you did.
Maybe. But yeah, it didn't really pan out. I'm not a vibraphonist, and uh, Yeah, never played any gigs.
But again, it was helpful because of the fact that she had Dean Earl teaching her triads and what a five or a flatted fifth was, and that that type of thing there, the forms of the tunes 32, and learning Sweet Georgia Brown or whatever the tune was, basic fundamentals, so she could transfer that to playing drums or anything else she wanted. But Dean Earl was the man.
Dean Earl was a legend. Dean Earl was somebody that everybody said could have gone to New York. He was a great pianist, but he just stayed in Boston. I think he taught at Berklee for 40 years or something, didn't he?
That's right.
Long time.
And he was somebody who you heard about. I mean, also a lot of cats spent time in Boston. I mean, before then, I mean, people like Don Redman, Slam Stewart, they all went to Boston Conservatory. And so even though they made their name somewhere else, a lot of cats had spent a little bit of time in Boston.
Well, I knew all of them because I met them at the barber shop on Saturdays. At that time we weren't allowed to be able to get rooms downtown, so the South End was filled with rooming houses, and so they all lived there, right 5 minutes from the barber shop. And man, I could talk to any of those guys.
I mean, the real barbershop. It was not a club.
Yeah,
it was a barbershop.
All those. So I
You
met
talk about a barbershop where people got actual haircuts. People think barbershop is like the name of a nightclub,
So that was the community, man, and you'd have cats out there singing tunes, writing music on the steps of the barbershop. I mean, it was different. It was friendly. That's how I learned how to. Jay Talbot was one of my best friends and teachers, teaching me how to play chords and structures.
Who was that? Jay
Talbot, big Jay Talbot. Remember Jay Talbot, tenor player?
No, I don't know him, but I'll take your word for it.
Abe, all those guys. Well, you probably didn't work with them, but those were the basic fundamental players in the community at the time, and everybody stayed in the South End. So the South End was flooded with jazz musicians.
Wow. And so out of this came Terri, and Terri's first thing he was telling me was playing with Clark Terry at 10 years old at the Wichita Jazz Festival.
Let me interrupt one thing. Let me say this, which we forget all the time, but when I write the memoirs one day, I have to include this. Her first influence in playing jazz music, and the first time she ever was at a jazz in a jazz club, I went in to sit in on a Sunday afternoon because I was babysitting Terri with Yellowjackets, Alan and organ player. I'm trying to think of his name. Little bits, the little guy played with Lionel Hampton. Anyhow, that's how she really wanted, or why, one of the big reasons why she wanted to play jazz, period. Because we got honking and we on flying home, and she enjoyed it, came home and took the horn out, and that was it.
Milt Buckner.
Milt Buckner, yeah.
Milt Buckner. But that was the first time she ever was exposed to a jam session and music live. Period.
Well, yeah, I only skipped to Clark only because that was the first time I traveled and somebody asked me to kind of come do a gig,
But did you sit in? You got to sit in with Milt Buckner? Is that what you?
No,
Illinois Jazz? Is this, or you just listened to
it?
Later on, she did television show with him. When they had the show at WV Channel 5, had the Good Morning shows and all that.
Or Just Jazz, I think. Yeah.
No, this was called the Good Morning Show with John Willis and Janet Langhart.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was a Boston.
Promoting Sandy's in Beverly at that time.
Oh, yeah. Well, we played a nice gig there. Terri and I with Don. We had mentioned that with Dick Johnson and Jimmy Mosher and Gray Sargent, I think Marshall Wood. This guy was having a new kind of recording technique of analog or digital, beginning of digital. I'm not sure what it was, but everybody said that was the reason we were assembled that night we did a basic a tribute to Bird, and with the three altos, and then but we didn't just play Bird stuff. We played all kinds of stuff, and then they were testing this kind of machine, and somehow Sandy knew there is a recording of that night. It was really a nice night.
Mhm.
But
oh, you said Dick Oates. You said Jimmy Mosier, you and
and Dick Johnson.
Johnson. Yeah, Dick Oates is the older guy, right?
Yeah, Dick Oates wasn't around then. I mean, he was around, but even though it wasn't in Boston.
Right.
It was about 1980, something like that.
Okay, so that I was around 15 or so. Yeah.
Yeah, and people were surprised that you could play the whole night without getting tired. I thought that was really the stupidest thing I ever heard anybody say. One of them, definitely, wow, that girl, she's really good. She can play the whole night without getting tired. I was like, she's 15 years old. Of course she can play the whole night without getting tired. I mean, it's what she played. You know, it's not about not getting tired. Anyway, I thought that was funny. But no, you were playing great at that age, and I was telling her, Terry too, that the only reason I didn't use her in my band was I had Bobby Ward.
Yeah, Bobby and you were buddies, man.
That's right. Well, he was my mentor. I was learning from Bobby. You know, I started out playing strip shows with him and Bobby Nellums
Yeah,
when I was 17.
Yeah.
We were playing in the combat zone,
Yeah.
and just trying to keep up with Bobby was an effort.
Well, you all were friends, close friends. At the same time, I was just getting hip to Bobby, and we used to play jam sessions over the Conleys because he lived across the street from Conleys at the time, and I knew Bobby very well, and we became friends, and
Yeah,
he,
well, you know, we all did, and I was telling Terry too that Bobby was more than a friend in a way. He was, you know, he was older than me, and he was a mentor. You know, he was somebody we would play duets together, and Bobby, with his fast way of talking, he'd say, when you play, don't try to play as fast as me. You know, when I'm running, let me run. When you running, I'm gonna let you run. But it's give and take, man, give and take. Don't try to run when I'm running because I'll walk all over you, and I'll run all over you.
that was him.
And it was funny because I thought like sometimes I didn't understand him because he used to talk so fast, and I thought it was maybe a racial thing that like the black people would understand him better. And I'd ask black people, "What did he say?" They said, "I don't know." And, nobody's gonna. But but I think that's important, Terry. And don't you think like when you play with people, understanding, because I'm
Yeah, I
sure
mean,
you must have learned a lot of that with Wayne Shorter.
well, with everybody, I think it's just a musical uh, thing that you have or you don't. Either you're going to listen and respond and leave space for others, or you're going to be non-musical and play all over the top of other people and not really listen and not respond, but kind of dictate the
Yeah.
energy, whatever's happening on stage. And drummers have the ability to do that and really kind of screw up the music, or they have the ability to uh, have more of a dialogue. So I think that more than learning that from Wayne, I think it was something I already understood. And, those are the types of things that got me the gigs that I got.
That would get you the gig in the first place. That's true. But
I was telling Terry, this is a funny thing, but she really didn't have, growing up as young as she was, she didn't have really peers to uh, to turn to and to have friendships with when she was coming on because she was so young. The peers were my age or older, and you were closer to it than most. So most of her gigs when she was coming up, she wasn't a local musician. She didn't play just gigs around town a lot. Everything was in New York or out of state. So that's how she really learned how to play. She was under the fire, under the gun all the time because there was always a named person on the gigs that would hire her. So that's how she really learned, had the opportunity to learn probably a little uh,
well,
faster than most because she was under the gun playing gigs with people that were over her head in the next generation.
Well, I always thought that you had a good influence that way. That you brought in a lot of people
Oh
to
yeah.
hear her and to play with her. Like I remember you bringing Joe Henderson, Kenny Barron, and Buster
Yeah.
up to Jonathan Swift's.
I used I used to play with Joe, believe it or not. When Joe was in the, I knew all those guys. I played with some of them. Joe and I were friends. When he was in the service in the 1950s, Joe and I played R&B gigs, and I got hired on a gig with Dayton Salvi. Ever heard Dayton Salvi, organ player? You know,
No, no.
well, anyhow, Dayton hired me because Joe played too many notes. He said, "Man, I heard about you. I'm going to play this gig, and it's a dance gig, and I'd like to have you and Joe play the gig." That's how I met Joe Henderson.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I got a lesson, man. I didn't even want to pick my horn up, man, because this guy was playing so much stuff. I said, "Oh, why did you hire me?" He said, "Man, because you can play the blues and the R&B stuff that we have to play for the dance. Joe ain't gonna play that." See, Joe and me were friends, man. You see, they were both from Ohio. They were one of the Ohio players, so to speak, as we say.
Right, right.
And the cats from Ohio used to stick together. So Dayton Southley found out that Joe was stationed there in Georgia, not too many miles, Fort Valley, and hired him, and then turned around and hired me too to play with him. So that's how I was very fortunate in to play with him and Harold Vick and all those guys, you
That's
know.
interesting. I think Roland Kirk, Rassan was from Columbus too, right from
Oh,
Ohio as well.
right.
And
Stuff really matters, though. A lot of people stick together when they're from certain places. Um,
yeah,
you,
look at Detroit. About I wanted to talk about just as your dad was very organizational. Very good with the organization and that type of thing. I noticed that you've done a lot of. Um, you're a founder and director of Berklee Institute of Jazz and
Gender justice.
Gender Justice. Sorry, and the Carr Center in Detroit, Michigan. I was just getting into your bio here when I was looking at it the other day, and you're in the board of trustees of the Recording Academy, and you've done a lot of stuff like that. And I guess you're still active in doing those kind of things. What
That's a,
uh, what keeps you into that?
I mean, I think you have like a aptitude and I don't know, I don't know what the word is. Just you lean toward doing certain things, and I've always been uh someone that likes that end of things. That's why I've produced Grammy winning recordings for other people. It takes a lot of organizational skills to produce, and also to just see the big picture of an album and what somebody's trying to do. And also, I like people, so I get involved, with these organizations uh, as artistic director or advisory board members or board of trustees or uh, just
So
whatever.
you like doing that? That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, but
The
also
other thing is you've had
networking is important in this industry. Networking is important. It's all about relationships too, and not that you do it just for the relationships, but it's a part of it. And there's people that don't get involved in anything, and they know less people.
hmm Now, what about the Mosaic project? That seemed like a very challenging and a beautiful work that you pulled off, and you got a Grammy for that. And then you have another thing called Real Life Story, and these seem to be continuing projects that you've worked on over the years, which is an interesting concept to me.
Yeah, no, Real Life Story was my very first major album. When I was 16, we recorded with Kenny Barron, Buster Williams, and George Coleman, and my dad's on the track. That was called TLC and Friends, but that didn't have a real release until 2 years ago. So it had a proper release 40 years later. But my first, you know, proper release was called Real Life Story in 1989. uh, After that, I did an album, I don't know, 10 to 15 years later, because I really couldn't get arrested with record companies after that album was Grammy nominated. But the next album was Jazz is a Spirit, and then Structure, two albums I did for a European label, Act Music, which is a German label. And then I came back with a follow up to Real Life Story called More to Say, Real Life Story Next Gen. So that was kind of using some of the same people and a bit of the same approach. And then I did the Mosaic Project, and I did a follow up to that called Mosaic Project Love and Soul. And I did win a Grammy for the first Mosaic project. Then I won a Grammy for Money Jungle, Provocative and Blue, which was a reimagining of Duke Ellington's Money Jungle. That's the one where I was the first woman to win in that
That was
cat.
Duke and Mingus and Max Roach, yeah, which people don't know that. That was
Right.
legendary
Yeah,
record.
that's exactly. But what was significant about that Grammy win was no woman had ever won in jazz instrumental for the Grammys.
And who was on your Money Jungle?
Christian McBride, Gerald Clayton. That was the trio, but then we had guests. Liz Wright was on a track. Um, Robin Eubanks, Tia Fuller, Antonio Hart. They were on a track, and then a percussionist, Arturo Stabile, was on a track, and Near Felder was on a little bit of it too. Um, and then I did Mosaic Love and Soul as a follow-up to the Mosaic Project. Then I did an album called Social Science with a band that I put together. Well, the album's called Waiting Game, and the band was Terri Lyne Carrington and Social Science. And I'm actually working now on a follow-up to that, which would be the second album of that band. Uh, and right after the first social science album, I did New Standards, which also won a Grammy. It was music from a book that I put out called New Standards 101 Lead Sheets by Women Composers, celebrating, all these composers because every time we go to play music and standards, those songs are written by men. So this book is an alternative to that. And then right after that, I did the current album, We Insist 2025, reimagining um, Max Roach and Abby Lincoln's album from 1960.
Now,
So,
wasn't there also a record you did, a children's record, a children's story with Esperanza and
no,
Jerry Allen? Was there some kind of story involved? What was that project?
that was not a record. That's just a children's book. It's called Three of a Kind. It's just a, like a poem, a book of. It's like
So
a
there's
poem.
no record that accompanies. There's no written. There's no
No,
sound that.
no. But we recorded a lot of shows live, and hopefully one day we'll put it out. Esperanza's busy and I'm busy, but I did promise Jerry we would do that, so we have recordings.
Yeah, it was a tragedy what happened with Jerry,
Absolutely.
but you so that children's book is available.
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon.
And what's the name of it again?
Three of a Kind.
Three of a Kind.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, like your experiences. I just want to get some chronology. In other words, like your first steady gig where you left home, went with a band. I saw you. You were with Wade Short. It was the first time that I heard you, but I'm sure you had some experiences before that. You went with Stan Getz. Did you actually travel with Stan?
I was his last drummer for his last tours, in I think it was 90 or 91.
Was that with
Um,
Kenny Barron? And
Kenny Barron, one was with Kenny Barron and Alex Blake, and then I did some other touring with Stan. That was um, Anthony Cox and a piano player, Peter. Um, I can't remember his last name at this moment. But the first tour that I went on was with Clark Terry when I went to Europe. And when I moved to New York, I was 18, and Clark had said, when you move to New York, you have a gig. So I started touring with him.
uh-huh.
And Wayne came after that when I was 21.
And Wayne came after Clark.
Mhm.
And Herbie Hancock. Didn't you do quite a few things with Herbie?
But that was after Wayne, so I met Herbie more through Wayne. So I played off and on with both of them for about 10 years.
And you did you do Arsenio's show with Mike Wolf? Was that?
I was the house drummer, 1989, yeah.
And Mike Wolf was the director.
Was.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yep. He actually asked me recently to do an album project, so we'll see if that happens.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I want to talk to you about that too. If you have a few minutes after this podcast,
Okay.
you may have to run away, but let me.
But
Well,
she spent a lot of time with a lot of other people too that she probably didn't even mention.
now you've been singing.
James
To, what did
Moody.
Sonny say?
He's
She
you have to lean in. He said I spent a lot of time with other people that I didn't mention because I can't mention everybody that
everybody.
I've played with.
Right.
But he just
Well,
mentioned
can you mention some that stand out? And maybe
James.
something about them
I
that
can
happened to you. What did you learn from them? Like in other words, like I'm
I mean
more
it's
interested
a
in this
laundry
show
list. It's a
that I
laundry
played here and then I wrote. I want you to say what you learn and how'd you learn it, and
so you
give
could
me some
ask me
insight into what makes you go.
all right, well then you can ask me that
Well,
specifically
I'm
about
asking you that.
I know, but I mean specifically about somebody. My father mentioned James Moody, and yes, I played quite a bit with James Moody. I also played 3 years with Al Jarreau, and I played quite a bit with David Sanborn. So in 1 year's time, I played with um, David Sanborn, Stan Getz, Wayne Shorter, some gigs with Pharoah Saunders. So these are all very different saxophone players, very, very different styles. David Sanborn is more like instrumental R&B. There's no swing. There's really not much. You don't have to know jazz necessarily to play with David Sanborn. So that was kind of one of my first forays into that kind of just pocket gig.
Eight
Uh,
eight time.
yeah, which was good for me. Wayne Shorter's gig was at the time was more like a fusion gig because it was very electronic, but it still had a lot of, very just very intricate music. Um, so that was, I consider that more like a fusion gig, but you really had to know jazz to do it well.
Well,
So
getting away not away from the music, but what makes the music is the people. And I know that you came, one night when I went to hear you at the Beekman Theater, I hung out with your parents between sets when you were playing with Wayne. And your mother mentioned, that Wayne had had some tragic things in his life happen in terms of he had lost his daughter years before, and then he had lost his niece not too long before that,
mhm.
and of course he lost his wife, and that you had come into his life at a certain time where he had really needed you. There was like
Well,
a kind of, I mean, he needed that relationship, and that they felt that you were not only fulfilling a musical relationship with him, but also on a personal level, he was able
I
to
would
get close to you.
Yeah, I would say that, well, at that time, when the gig you're talking about in New York, his wife was still alive, very much alive for, probably another 10 years or more.
All right,
Um,
so he had lost his daughter.
but what I was going to
Recognize it.
say is his wife is the one that said that I reminded, uh, she was the first one to say, like, I reminded them of Iska, their daughter Iska, who had died. Um, and then yeah, Wayne agreed too. But he had a lot of people around him, a lot of family, her family. But I think more than, reminding them of their daughter, I think it was that Wayne always championed women musicians. He was very ahead of his time. When he hired me, he had already hired Marilyn Mazur to play percussion. She used to play with Miles Davis before that. And and then even after that, he had hired Rachel Z. He had hired Tracy Wormworth on bass. Um, and Rini Rosnes. She played with him. So I felt like Wayne was very in tune with the kind of balance that needs to be on the stage because the jazz stage should really represent the kind of world you want to live in. Any art should represent the kind of world you want to live in. And, this male dominance, uh, is really funny to me because nobody said jazz is men's music. And whoever said that, if they did, I would have to disagree with them. So, I feel like Wayne was very ahead of his time with that because I think an interviewer asked him once why he had hired these women. He said he said it was because he reads a lot of comic books and he feels like in the future, women are leading and children are, women and children are the ones that are doing the most. And I agree with him because we have to look to our youth. We can't look at young musicians like like you're the elder. They have to, like there's a hierarchy because we have to pay attention to what young musicians are doing because they are the future and you can't get stuck with what you know and what you liked when you were in your 20s because the music evolves. You can get stuck there, but people like Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock did not, and those are very big influences on me for those reasons.
Yeah, well, I see. I could see that that philosophy would, definitely affect you. And though I mean, I think the music was largely male. I think not so much because, well, partly because men are a certain way, but also because society, for many years, I mean, if you were a girl and you had to in the school band, you're supposed to play the flute. In
Yeah,
fact, a guy that played the flute was looked upon as being strange. It was. I think that people, being in their own stupidity, had certain, things they felt.
but you're
That,
right.
that
You're right. These things that oppress people are systemic. They do come from a society, and gender is a social construct. Uh, so are the things we have to challenge and also want to change. I think there's a lot of people that do want that to change, and then there's a lot of people that are just kind of stuck in their ways, but it's nothing that you have to accept and it's not real because just because women had barriers, extra barriers and extra burdens, if they wanted to express themselves artistically in this music, that doesn't mean it's something that is okay or that we accept. It happens, but this is now, gosh, jazz has been around 100 years. And so some of the things that were happening even in the 50s, 60s, even in the 70s, I believe society has evolved and is still evolving. Even though there's an administration right now that wants to take us backwards, I believe that, like Martin Luther King said, I forget the exact quote, but the arc leans toward justice. Uh, Basically, like this arc of progress leans toward justice. Um, and yeah, we have to keep speaking out and speaking about what we believe in and doing what's right. Because if you talk about it long enough, anybody with any common sense will say, "Oh yeah, you're right. Like women should not have extra burdens trying to play jazz. It should not be, um, just a boy club or people hiring their friends." And it started so socially in high school or middle school even, and people wanted to hang out with their friends, and then band directors supported that. And then it became not fun for a lot of young women. So many have told me how they quit because it wasn't fun. And, it's something that was fun for a lot of the boys that were studying. So then you have the problem with that is then you have this kind of segregated thing where women go and if they really want to play, they may go play with each other. And then that's not cool either. You know, I mean, segregation is not cool, and also assimilation is not cool because you shouldn't have to also be one of the boys to make it. And so many of the successful women playing jazz made it because they could play as good as the next guy or play as strong or as hard. So there's another aesthetic in the music that hasn't fully developed yet, and that's what I'm excited about hearing.
yeah, I think and you've been a pioneer in that, in making that happen, which is a wonderful thing to be.